The air tasted wrong. Marcus Chen stood at the entrance of Shaft 7, his government-issued hard hat casting a shadow over his face as he stared into the abyss that would become his workplace for the next 6 months. The metal elevator cage creaked in the wind, its rusted bars looking more like a prison cell than transportation. But it wasn't the rust or the darkness that made his skin crawl, it was the sound. Deep below, something was humming. Not the mechanical hum of mining equipment or ventilation systems. This was organic, rhythmic, almost like a lullaby being sung by something that had forgotten what melody meant. The sound drifted up from the depths, carried by air that smelled of copper pennies and something else, something sweet and rotting that made Marcus's stomach turn. "You getting cold feet already?" Marcus turned to see his supervisor, Dale Hutchinson, approaching with a clipboard and a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Dale had been working these government mining operations for 15 years, and it showed in the permanent stoop of his shoulders and the way his fingers constantly twitched as if searching for cigarettes that weren't there. "Just listening," Marcus replied, nodding toward the shaft. "What's that sound?" Dale's grin faltered for just a moment so briefly that Marcus almost missed it. "Sound? Oh, that's just the ventilation system. Old equipment, you know, gets a bit musical sometimes." He clapped Marcus on the shoulder with a hand that felt cold even through the thick work jacket. "Come on, let's get you suited up. Welcome back to the channel, by the way. Hope you're watching from somewhere safe tonight. Don't forget to hit that like button if this story gives you chills, and subscribe if you want more tales from the darkest corners of our world. Trust me, you're going to want to see where this goes." The humming stopped abruptly, as if something far below had suddenly noticed they were listening. 3 weeks earlier, Marcus had been just another unemployed geology graduate drowning in student debt and rejection letters. The job posting had appeared on a government contractor website like a miracle. Geological survey technician, immediate hire, competitive pay, security clearance required. The location was listed simply as Remote Mining Facility, Nevada, with a starting salary that was almost too good to be true. The interview process had been surprisingly straightforward. A single phone call, a few basic questions about his education and willingness to work in isolation, and a background check that took exactly 48 hours to complete. No technical assessment, no multiple rounds of interviews, just a FedEx envelope containing contracts, non-disclosure agreements, and a bus ticket to a town called Millfield that didn't show up on any map Marcus could find. Millfield turned out to be little more than a cluster of prefabricated buildings and a diner that served coffee strong enough to wake the dead. The town existed solely to service the mining operation, which sprawled across the desert like a metallic cancer. Chain-link fences topped with razor wire surrounded the facility, and guards checked identification with the thoroughness of Border Patrol agents. Marcus's accommodation was a small trailer in a row of identical units that housed the other workers. The trailer came furnished with the basics: a narrow bed, a kitchenette, and a television that only received 3 channels, all of them showing the same repeating broadcast about mining safety procedures. The windows were small and positioned high on the walls, offering views of nothing but desert scrub and the imposing silhouette of the main mining structure. His neighbors were a quiet bunch. There was Janet, a heavy machinery operator who had been at the site for 2 years and rarely spoke above a whisper. Tom worked in the processing facility and had developed a nervous habit of constantly checking over his shoulder. Sarah handled logistics and had dark circles under her eyes that suggested she hadn't been sleeping well for quite some time. During his first week, Marcus noticed small oddities that his rational mind tried to dismiss. The work schedules were unusual. Certain shifts were designated as surface only, while others required descent into what the workers simply called the deep sections. No one seemed eager to explain what exactly was being extracted from the mine, and his official job description was maddeningly vague. Monitor geological conditions and report anomalies. The anomalies started small. Rock samples that registered temperatures slightly higher than ambient air. Seismic readings that showed microtremors with no identifiable source. Air quality measurements that occasionally spiked with trace elements that didn't appear in any standard geological surveys of the region. Marcus documented everything meticulously as his training demanded. But when he submitted his first weekly report, his supervisor Dale had simply nodded and filed it away without comment. "Government work," Dale had explained with that same hollow grin. "They like their paperwork, but don't expect much feedback. Just keep doing what you're doing." The real strangeness Marcus was beginning to realize wasn't in the data he was collecting. It was in how normal everyone was pretending everything was. It was during his third week that Marcus first saw the transportation schedule. He'd been working late in the surface geology lab, analyzing core samples that had come up from Shaft 7 earlier that day. The samples were unusual dark rock shot through with veins of what looked like crystallized metal, but unlike any mineral formation he'd studied in school. Under the microscope, the crystal structures seemed to shift and flow, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. He was so focused on his work that he didn't notice Dale enter the lab until the man cleared his throat. "Working late again, Chen." Dale's voice carried a note of something that might have been concern or warning. "Just trying to understand these formations," Marcus replied, not looking up from the microscope. "I've never seen anything like them. The crystalline structure appears to be best not to think too hard about it." Dale's hand suddenly covered the eyepiece, forcing Marcus to look up. "Some things down there, well, they don't fit into neat scientific categories." Before Marcus could respond, Dale had moved to the filing cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. Papers scattered as he rifled through them, and Marcus caught a glimpse of what looked like a transportation manifest. His eyes caught on several lines before Dale gathered the papers up. "Shipment 47B12 containers. Sublevel 9. Authorization Project Deep Echo Destination. Redacted. Contents. Biological specimens. Priority Alpha." "Biological specimens?" Marcus asked. "I thought this was a mineral extraction operation." Dale's face went pale. "You didn't see that. It wasn't a request. But if we're dealing with biological material, shouldn't I be taking different safety precautions? My clearance level should include—" "Your clearance level includes what it needs to include." Dale's voice had gone cold. "And what it includes is geological surveying. Nothing more." That night, Marcus lay awake in his trailer, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of what he'd seen. Biological specimens from a mine. It could be fossils, he told himself. Ancient organisms preserved in rock. That would explain the unusual formations, the strange crystalline structures that seemed to move under magnification. But fossils didn't require priority alpha authorization. Fossils didn't get shipped to redacted destinations in the middle of the night. Around 2 a.m. Marcus was jolted awake by the sound of heavy machinery. Through his small window, he could see a convoy of trucks moving across the facility grounds, their headlights cutting through the darkness like searchlights. The vehicles were unmarked military-style transport trucks with canvas-covered beds that bulged with whatever they were carrying. Marcus pulled on his clothes and slipped outside. The desert air was cold against his skin as he crept between the trailers, following the sound of the convoy. The trucks were heading toward a section of the facility he'd never been to, a heavily secured area surrounded by additional fencing and marked with biohazard symbols. As he got closer, he could see workers in full hazmat suits unloading containers from the trucks. The containers were large, rectangular, and made of some kind of dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They were also making noise, a low rhythmic thumping that sounded disturbingly like a heartbeat. One of the hazmat workers stumbled as he carried a container, and for a moment, Marcus thought he heard something else. A sound like wet fabric tearing, followed by what might have been a whisper, or might have been the wind. The worker quickly regained his footing, but not before the container tilted enough for something to slosh audibly inside. Whatever was in there, it was liquid. Or mostly liquid. Marcus was so focused on the workers that he didn't notice the guard approaching until a flashlight beam hit him directly in the face. "Hey, you're not supposed to be here." The guard was young, maybe early 20s, with nervous eyes and a hand that trembled slightly as he held his flashlight. His name tag read Brooks, and he had the look of someone who was very new to this job and already regretting it. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, raising his hands in what he hoped was a non-threatening gesture. "I heard the noise and I was just—" "You need to get back to your quarters, now." Brooks's voice cracked slightly. and you need to forget what you saw here. I just saw some trucks, and you saw nothing." This time, Brooks's voice was stronger, but Marcus could see sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold night air. "Those are just supply deliveries. Equipment for the deep sections." As if summoned by their conversation, one of the containers let out a sound that was definitely not mechanical. A low, mournful cry that seemed to echo up from somewhere far below the ground. Brooks went white. "Get back to your trailer," he whispered urgently. "Please, for both our sakes." Marcus didn't argue. As he walked back across the facility grounds, he could hear the convoy continuing its work behind him. But now he could also hear something else, that humming sound from the mine shaft rising up through the desert air like a song being sung by something that should have been dead. The next morning arrived with an announcement that Marcus had been reassigned to deep section monitoring. "Consider it a promotion," Dale said, though his smile looked more like a grimace. "You'll be working directly in Shaft 7 collecting data from the active excavation sites. It's more hands-on than surface work." Marcus wanted to ask about what he'd seen the night before, but something in Dale's expression warned him off. Instead, he accepted his new assignment and the additional equipment that came with it: a reinforced hard hat with an attached headlamp, a portable air quality monitor, and a radio that seemed unnecessarily heavy for its size. "The radio's important," Dale emphasized, handling the device with unusual care. "Down there, you stay in constant contact with surface control. If your radio stops working, you evacuate immediately. No exceptions." "What exactly am I looking for down there?" "Anomalies," Dale replied, which was the same non-answer Marcus had been getting for 3 weeks. "Anything unusual in the rock formation's air composition or environmental factors?" The elevator ride down to the deep sections took longer than Marcus had expected. The shaft descended far below what should have been possible for a mineral extraction operation. Marcus estimated they dropped at least 800 feet before the elevator finally shuddered to a stop. When the doors opened, the air that rushed in was warm and humid, carrying that same copper and rot smell he'd noticed on his first day. The deep sections were a maze of tunnels carved through rock that looked nothing like the geological surveys Marcus had studied. The walls were smooth, too smooth, as if they'd been carved by something other than conventional mining equipment. And they were warm to the touch, warmer than they should have been at this depth. His first assignment was to monitor a section designated as Tunnel 7C, which branched off from the main corridor like a side street. The tunnel stretched into darkness beyond the reach of his headlamp, and as Marcus walked deeper into it, he began to notice markings on the walls. At first, he thought they were natural formations, mineral veins, or stress fractures in the rock. But as he examined them more closely, the markings began to look almost deliberate. Curved lines that connected to form patterns, spirals that seemed to draw the eye inward, and symbols that looked disturbingly like letters from an alphabet he didn't recognize. Marcus set up his monitoring equipment and began taking readings. The air quality was within acceptable parameters, though the temperature was consistently 15 degrees higher than it should have been. The seismic sensors showed constant low-level vibrations as if something large was moving far below. And then there was the sound. It started as a whisper so faint that Marcus thought it might be air moving through distant ventilation shafts. But as he stood still and listened, the whisper resolved into something that sounded almost like voices. Multiple voices speaking in unison, using words in a language he'd never heard but somehow almost understood. "Come deeper," they seemed to be saying. "Come see what we found." Marcus keyed his radio. "Surface control, this is Chen. I'm getting some unusual acoustic phenomena down here. Might be echo effects from other work areas, but I thought I should report it." Static answered him for several long seconds before Dale's voice crackled through. "Copy that, Chen. Acoustic phenomena are normal for that section. Just background noise from the excavation equipment." "It doesn't sound like equipment," Marcus replied. "It sounds like..." The radio went dead. Marcus tried several times to re-establish contact but got nothing but static. Following protocol, he should have evacuated immediately. But as he started back toward the main corridor, his headlamp illuminated something that stopped him cold. There was another tunnel. It branched off from Tunnel 7C, heading deeper into the earth. Marcus was certain it hadn't been there when he'd walked this way 20 minutes earlier. The opening was perfectly circular, too perfect for any drilling equipment he knew of, and the air flowing out of it was warm and humid and carried a smell like flowers left too long in water. Marcus approached the new tunnel carefully, his monitoring equipment registering increasingly erratic readings. The temperature spiked to nearly 90 degrees, the air composition showed trace elements that weren't in any database, and the seismic readings indicated movement that was definitely organic in nature. At the mouth of the tunnel, Marcus's headlamp illuminated walls that weren't rock at all. They were smooth and slightly reflective, with a texture that looked disturbingly like skin. And they were moving, expanding, and contracting rhythmically like the inside of something's throat. The voices were clearer now, coming from deeper in the tunnel. They were still speaking in that unknown language, but Marcus found that if he listened carefully, he could almost make out meaning in the words. They were describing things, vast spaces filled with water creatures that moved through darkness, and something they called the awakening. Marcus knew he should leave. Every instinct he had was screaming at him to turn around and run back to the surface. But there was something hypnotic about the voices, something that made him want to understand what they were trying to tell him. He took a step into the tunnel. The walls immediately responded to his presence, the skin-like surface rippling as if it recognized him. The voices became excited, welcoming, and Marcus felt a strange sense of homecoming, as if he was walking into a place he'd been meant to find all along. 20 feet into the tunnel, Marcus found the first chamber. It was enormous, easily the size of a cathedral, with a ceiling that disappeared into darkness above. The walls were covered in the same flowing symbols Marcus had seen in the regular tunnels, but here they seemed to glow with a faint phosphorescent light. And in the center of the chamber was a pool. The water was black and perfectly still, but Marcus could see shapes moving beneath its surface. Large shapes with too many limbs and eyes that reflected his headlamp like stars. The shapes seemed to be aware of his presence, rising closer to the surface, as if curious about their visitor. And floating just beneath the water's surface were dozens of the metal containers he'd seen being unloaded from the trucks. The containers were open, their contents long since released into the pool. But Marcus could still see traces of what they'd held, organic material that looked like tissue samples, but tissue from no creature he could identify. Some pieces still moved, writhing in the black water like they were trying to swim back together into a single organism. The voices were coming from the pool now, and Marcus realized that the shapes in the water weren't just swimming, they were speaking. The sounds emerged from the dark water as complex harmonies, beautiful and terrifying, telling stories of places beneath the earth where different rules applied and different kinds of life had learned to thrive. "We've been waiting," the voices said. And this time Marcus understood them perfectly. "We've been preparing. Soon it will be time to return to the surface, to reclaim what was taken from us so long ago." Marcus backed away from the pool, his rational mind finally breaking through whatever spell the voices had cast over him. This wasn't a mining operation. This was something else entirely, an excavation of something that should have been left buried, a communion with things that should never have been disturbed. He turned to run and found his way blocked by Dale. But it wasn't really Dale anymore. The man's eyes had gone completely black, and when he smiled, Marcus could see that his teeth had been replaced by something that looked like rows of tiny, sharp crystals. "I was wondering when you'd find this place," Dale said, and his voice carried harmonics that matched the sounds from the pool. "You're just in time for the feeding." Marcus ran. He sprinted past Dale, or the thing that had once been Dale, and plunged back into the tunnel that led to the main corridor. Behind him, he could hear the sounds of pursuit, but not just footsteps. There was a wet sliding noise, as if something large and boneless was flowing through the tunnels after him. His headlamp flickered as he ran, casting wild shadows on the walls that seemed to move independently of his motion. The tunnel that had led him to the chamber was changing, stretching longer, the walls closing in gradually, as if trying to trap him inside. The air grew thicker with each breath, and Marcus realized he was no longer running through carved rock, he was running through something alive. The radio on his belt crackled to life. "Chen, where are you? Chen, respond immediately." Marcus grabbed the radio without stopping. "This is Chen. I'm in Tunnel 7C, but it's not. The tunnels are alive. The whole facility is some kind of Static overwhelmed his transmission, but not before he heard something in the background of the radio signal, the same harmonious voices he'd heard at the pool now speaking through the communication system. "There's no escape," they said. "There never was. We've been part of this place since the beginning, and now you'll be part of us too." The main corridor was just ahead, but as Marcus burst through the tunnel opening, he saw that it too had changed. What had been a straight path to the elevator was now a circular chamber with multiple tunnel openings branching off in all directions. The elevator was nowhere to be seen. Worse, the chamber wasn't empty. They stood around the perimeter like sentinels, his fellow workers, but transformed. Janet, the heavy machinery operator, had skin that rippled with subcutaneous movement. Tom's arms had elongated, ending in fingers that were far too long and jointed in places where joints shouldn't exist. Sarah's eyes had multiplied, covering her face like a cluster of dark stars. They were all smiling with Dale's crystal teeth. "Welcome to the real mining operation," Janet said, her voice carrying the same harmonic undertones Marcus had heard at the pool. "We've been excavating so much more than mineral deposits." Marcus backed toward the center of the chamber, his monitoring equipment beeping frantically as it registered readings that shouldn't have been possible. The temperature was approaching 100 degrees, the air composition was becoming unbreathable, and the seismic sensors were showing massive movement all around him. "What are you?" he whispered. "We're what this place was always meant to become," Tom replied, taking a step closer. His elongated fingers scraped against the chamber walls, leaving gouges in the rock. "The mining operation was just a cover story, a way to provide us with the resources we needed for the transformation." The government knows exactly what we are," Sarah interrupted, her multiple eyes blinking in complex patterns. "They've been feeding us for months. Those containers you saw, those were just the beginning. Biological samples from around the world, creatures from the deepest ocean trenches, organisms that were never meant to see sunlight." Marcus felt the wall behind him and realized he was trapped. The chamber continued to shift around him, the walls breathing like the inside of some massive organism. The air was becoming thicker, almost viscous, and he could taste metal and decay with every breath. "We tried to make it easy for you," Dale's voice echoed from one of the tunnel openings, though Marcus couldn't see him in the darkness. "We tried to let you discover the truth gradually, to give you time to understand what we were offering. But you insisted on asking questions, on looking where you shouldn't look." The pool from the chamber was rising through the floor now, black water spreading across the rock like spilled ink. The shapes Marcus had seen swimming in its depths were emerging, pulling themselves onto dry land with limbs that seemed to multiply and reshape themselves as they moved. They were beautiful and horrifying. At the same time, creatures that looked like they might have been human once, but had been changed by something that operated according to different biological rules. They moved with fluid grace, their skin shifting colors like oil on water, their eyes holding intelligence that was alien but unmistakably aware. "Join us," they said in unison, their voices creating harmonies that seemed to resonate in Marcus's bones. "Help us complete the transformation. Help us bring the surface world into alignment with what lies beneath." Marcus looked around the chamber and realized that his former co-workers, weren't threatening him. They were pleading with him. Whatever had happened to them, they genuinely believed it was something wonderful, something necessary. But Marcus could see what they couldn't, the biological monitoring equipment scattered around the chamber, still recording data from the government's experiments. This wasn't evolution or transformation, this was infection. Something ancient and patient that had been waiting deep beneath the earth, slowly converting everything it touched into extensions of itself. The radio on his belt crackled one final time. "Chen, respond immediately. Extraction team is en route to your location." Marcus grabbed the radio and keyed the transmit button. "This is Chen. The facility is compromised. Repeat, the facility is compromised. Do not send anyone else down here. Seal the shafts and evacuate everyone to..." Janet's elongated hand closed over the radio, crushing it to pieces. But not before Marcus heard something in the background of the transmission helicopter rotors and voices shouting orders in military cadence. "They're not coming to rescue you," Dale said, stepping into the chamber from one of the tunnels. Half of his face was now covered in the same crystalline formations Marcus had seen in the rock samples. They're coming to collect the next phase of specimens. You see, Marcus, you were never here to monitor a mining operation. You were here to be converted to become part of the next batch of material for the surface facilities. The black water was up to Marcus's ankles now, and he could feel things moving beneath the surface, brushing against his legs with curiosity that felt almost affectionate. The creatures that had emerged from the pool were surrounding him, but not aggressively. They moved like they were welcoming a long-lost family member home. And despite every rational thought in his mind, Marcus found himself beginning to understand why his co-workers looked so peaceful, so content with their transformation. The water felt warm and welcoming against his skin, and the voices of the creatures were beginning to make a kind of sense that went deeper than language. "This is how it should be," they sang to him.